We kick things off at Clark County District Court in Vancouver, Washington.
The basis for the 120 days is due to the nature of the incident, the extent of the injuries, and the extent of the medical treatment that the victim had to undergo.
The injuries being described are those of 17-year-old victim Jordan Holgerson.
And I would just note for the court that the injury you can see in that photograph was not just on her legs. She had similar injuries to her torso and throughout her body, so it was quite extensive.
The defendant is 19-year-old Taylor Smith. 2 years ago, the former friends went to Molten Falls Regional Park. That day, their relationship and their lives were changed forever.
It's already recording. You gotta go.
Stop. Wait. Stop. I'm gonna push you. No.
That's Holgerson as she stands on the ledge of a bridge above the Lewis River.
Stop talking. Stop talking.
Smith is directly behind her. And that is a 60-foot drop to the water below.
Well, she's saying no.
No,
Ready?
Luckily, Holgerson survived, but she suffered multiple injuries, including 6 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and air bubbles in her chest.
Taylor made a just very bad decision at a very, very bad time.
Smith was charged with reckless endangerment, a misdemeanor, which carries a maximum sentence of 1 year in jail and a $5,000 fine. But in a deal with prosecutors, Smith agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a sentence of 60 days home confinement, 30 days of community crew, and 30 days of community service, but no jail time. On the day of sentencing, the victim makes an emotional statement to the judge, Darvin Zimmerman.
So, Jordan, I'm 17. I didn't ask for any of this, but last summer my said-to-be good friend changed my life for the worse.
The moment becomes too painful for Holgerson, so a court advocate steps in to finish her statement.
This nightmare started for me when I was falling through the air, and I was really terrified. When I was being pulled from the water, I thought, I'm going to die, because I couldn't breathe, and I was watching my body change color by the second. I spent 3 days in the hospital. Once I left the hospital, I was left in pain. I can't sleep at night anymore because of PTSD and insomnia. I have these anxiety attacks that are so bad that my body feels like it's shutting down, and I feel like I'm going to die. Through all this suffering for me, I'm just disappointed that Taylor has not owned up to her actions and wasn't sincere about apologizing. I never wanted to be pushed off that bridge.
Okay, thank you.
Next, it's Smith's turn to address the court.
This past August, an incident happened at Molten Falls, and neither mine or Jordan's life has been the same since. I'd like to sincerely apologize to Jordan Holgerson and her family and friends for the pain and humiliation I had caused by my mindless action that occurred last summer. I have and will continue to try my best to right my wrongs and pray for a full recovery, not only physically but emotionally, to the Holgersons and the other people I've hurt by the decision I made. Thank you.
After Smith's tearful apology, it's time for the judge to determine the sentence, bringing an end to this painful saga for both young women and their families.
Thank you.
That's Holgerson's mom, who spoke earlier, and she has just one more thing she wants to tell the judge.
And Taylor showed, with the no remorse, while Jordan was in the hospital, Taylor made herself to the Clark County Fair, having fun. Taylor continues to party and drink throughout this whole time. And so part of that is why we don't believe she's shown any remorse.
Finally, the judge announces the sentence.
So, in light of the serious injury to the victim, the sentence is going to be as follows. 40 days, 30 of 8 of those days going to be on work crew, and 2 are going to be in custody. We're going to start that now. I think we need to do some jail time.
The judge rules against the prosecutor's deal of no jail time and sends the 19-year-old to jail for 2 days.
That will be it.
In addition to the jail time and work detail, Smith must also pay a fine of $300 and have no contact with the victim for 2 years.
If you choose for me to die, it's only going to cause more pain and suffering for another family, not me.
A warning here. our next story may be disturbing for some viewers.
We were going to go into the house. Austin was going to distract Justin, and then I was going to come up behind him and choke him and kill him.
Next, we're in Lebanon, Ohio, for the trial of 19-year-olds Timothy Mosley and Austin Myers. The two teens have been charged with kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and the murder of Myers' friend, 18-year-old Justin Back. The defendants allegedly worked together to plan, then carry out the murder. But now that they find themselves on trial, loyalty falls by the wayside. As part of a plea deal, Mosley agrees to testify against his alleged co-conspirator. He begins by claiming Austin Myers first cased the victim's house before the murder.
That Monday we were at the house. When Austin used the restroom, he said that he saw the safe and that he saw that it was indeed cracked.
The safe was owned by the victim's stepfather and believed to contain $20,000 and a handgun. Mosley then lays out the sadistic plan they allegedly made to kill Justin Back using a metal choke wire.
We were going to go into the house. Austin was going to distract Justin, and then I was going to come up behind him and choke him and kill him.
The prosecution argues that the use of such a brutal weapon speaks volumes about the mindset of the defendants at the time.
The garrote or choke wire is a close-in weapon. It's very personal. You have to surprise your victim from behind, slip it over his head, around his neck, with force and violence.
But Mosley claims it was all just part of their master plan.
The idea of strangling him, that way it would create no mess. Pretty much be an easier job to handle.
Prosecutors then asked Mosley to recall any words that may have been exchanged as they carried out the attack.
At first, it was minimal conversation, if any. Obviously, Justin was trying to put up a fight, and he wasn't overpowering us. Almost like a few moments after, Justin was trying to ask why. He was pleading to stop, and pretty much begging for his life.
What did Austin say in response to these questions and statements that Justin Back is making as he's attempting to kill him?
In the lines of, it's all right, it's almost over.
When strangulation didn't work, Mosley allegedly went a step further.
Through the panicking in the fight, I pulled out my knife and started to stab Justin in the back.
After Mosley allegedly stabbed Justin Back to death, the pair removed his body from the home. In court, the prosecution points to a surveillance video of Mosley and Myers purchasing snacks at a gas station just a short time after the murder.
Where's Justin while this photo's being taken?
In the trunk.
The alleged motive for the murder was to steal the contents of the safe in the victim's home. But what was inside turned out to be a bust.
Just random items.
Was it what you expected?
Not at all.
Mosley's emotionless testimony is enough for jurors to convict Austin Myers of aggravated murder, even though Myers did not inflict any of the stab wounds that ultimately killed the victim. As part of Myers' sentencing, Justin Back's mother and father deliver victim impact statements.
Austin could have stopped it, but tells Justin, it's okay, it's almost over. You could have changed your mind many times, but you didn't, especially when Justin was begging for his life.
I'm not going to stand up here and tell you how much I hate you. That is without question. I would just hope that every time you close your eyes at night, you see my son Justin.
Before learning his punishment, it's time to hear from Austin Myers.
Austin, is there something that you would like to say to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry that this happened. I know that doesn't bring Justin back, but I'm sorry. If you choose for me to die, it's only going to cause more pain and suffering for another family, not me. It won't hurt me. I won't feel anything. It's going to hurt more innocent people, the people that I love. I ask you not to spread this pain any further to any more innocent people.
But Myers' pleas fall on deaf ears as he becomes the youngest person in Ohio to be sentenced to death. As for Timothy Mosley,
I just wanted to say that I really am sorry for what I've done.
By taking a plea deal and agreeing to testify, prosecutors agree not to pursue the death penalty, and he's sentenced to life in prison without parole.
He gets the difference. He gets it. Don't you get it? I get it. You get it? You get it? Everybody gets it.
Next, we head to the Whitley County Judicial Center in Williamsburg, Kentucky. This is Richie Dawn. Moments earlier, he was seen angrily throwing trash cans against a wall outside of a courtroom on the second floor of the building. It's unclear what Dawn was so upset about. He wasn't even listed on the court's docket that day, yet he was heard rambling about the courts robbing him. As he makes his way towards the exit, Chief Security Officer Tommy Hurst attempts to arrest Dawn for disorderly conduct. But the trash tosser quickly becomes a trash talker, telling Hurst not stopping. But as another security guard positions herself between Dawn and the exit, things get physical. Hurst grapples with Dawn from behind. Dawn then snatches the security wand and smashes Hurst multiple times, splitting his head open. Eventually, Hurst gets the upper hand and takes Dawn down to the ground. Later, he'd need 6 staples to close the gash on his head and still had no idea why Dawn was so enraged.
I didn't know at the time. The only thing that I was getting out of him is that he had got robbed. He had everything took away from him. He wasn't making clear sense to me.
Dawn is arrested and charged with third-degree assault, first-degree disorderly conduct, and a resisting arrest. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for third-degree assault. Next, we're in Newark, New Jersey, where Judge James Convery is overseeing a divorce hearing. On one side is Benjamin Taylor and his attorney, Yvette Ramos Alvarez. And on the other is his soon-to-be ex-wife. To establish Taylor's total yearly income, a copy of his Social Security earnings statement has been requested by his wife's attorney.
Now Ms. Kolsky comes back after everything was finished except for the Social Security earnings statements, which he doesn't.
He gets his Social Security every year indicating.
The earnings statement.
He gets his earnings statement. He gets it. He gets it every year. So she asked for it. Why didn't he provide it?
He doesn't have it.
He threw it away?
I would presume he did.
Oh, come on.
As you can see, Judge Convery is not buying the dog ate my homework story. So he decides to do a quick courtroom poll to prove his point.
Don't you get it? I get it. You get it? You get it? Everybody gets it. Social Security sends it to your home every year.
Alvarez, however, disagrees, based on her own experience.
No, I don't get it. They sent it to my home 4 years ago. I haven't received it in the last 3.
This is the final moment before Judge Convery says something he'll regret.
Well, when did you become an illegal alien?
Judge?
Alvarez is taken aback by the judge's comment. Not only is she of Hispanic descent, but she's also the former president of the Hispanic Bar Association of New Jersey.
Judge, I am going to... That was a totally inappropriate comment.
I didn't mean it. Listen to me.
As Judge Convery tries to backpedal, Alvarez moves forward, right out the door. Then comes the awkward silence. Alvarez returned to the courtroom 10 minutes later, and Judge Convery apologized, but the damage had been done. Alvarez later filed a misconduct complaint against Judge Convery, which, along with other public complaints, led to a public reprimand by the New Jersey Supreme Court. Next, we head to the Bradford Crown Court in Bradford, UK, for a rather dull-looking day that's about to get very interesting. This is a 17-year-old who's just been sentenced to 21 weeks in jail for stealing a mobile phone. And this is 21-year-old Callum Fintner, who's about to press a button on the wall, allowing a door to fly open so his very fast friend can attempt to escape. In an instant, Fintner goes from alleged co-conspirator to full-on cheerleader. Once the convicted phone thief makes it out of the hallway, he takes off through the security checkpoint with 4 security officers in hot pursuit, and his loyal friend trailing close behind. It's obvious from the security camera footage that the teen's speed is just too much for the Bradford Crown Court security team. By the time they get outside, 1, 2, 3 guards seem to decide it's just not worth chasing him any further. But one dedicated officer refuses to quit. He keeps up the pursuit, though at a slower pace. And of course, Fintner shows up again and heads down the stairs, presumably to meet up with his friend and celebrate the successful getaway. Unfortunately for the daring duo, the mobile phone bandit was caught 2 days later and given an extra 6 months in jail for the escape. As for Fintner, by the time he stepped in front of the judge, he decided not to press his luck. He pled guilty to aiding and abetting his friend's escape and was sentenced to 3 months in jail. A warning here. Our next story may be disturbing for some viewers. We're in Cleveland, Ohio, where once promising basketball star Tony Farmer awaits sentencing for a litany of crimes. Farmer was considered one of the top 100 high school players in the nation and heavily recruited by several major Division I college programs. But those hoop dreams were shattered after the Ohio All-Star was caught on camera in a fit of rage, brutally assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Andrea Lane, in the lobby of her apartment building. Farmer pled guilty to charges of kidnapping, felonious assault, robbery, and intimidation. In the courtroom today are several of Farmer's supporters, including coaches, family members, and even the victim, Andrea Lane, who spoke on his behalf despite being attacked.
I don't know what was wrong with him that day. I know he was a person. I hope he still is. I hope he learns from this. He really needs help. I don't think jail will give him that.
Farmer's freedom and basketball future now rest in the hands of Judge Pamela Barker.
The defendant shall serve a term of 3 years, which is the minimum on count 1 of that. As to count 2 in that case, felonious assault, a felony of the second degree, it is ordered that the defendant shall serve a term of 2 years in prison on that count. As to count 3 of that case, the robbery, which is also a felony of the second degree, the court orders that the defendant shall serve a term of 2 years on that as well.
As Farmer listens to the judge, he seemingly believes he's just been sentenced to 7 years in prison. But what he doesn't realize is that the sentence is not nearly as long as it sounds.
I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished.
After Farmer's lawyer attempts to reassure him, he's helped to his feet by 2 bailiffs, while Judge Barker concludes the sentencing.
On these full counts of the felony of the third degree, the court orders that the defendant shall serve a term of 9 months in prison on that count. All of these terms are going to be served concurrently, which means that the defendant is, in effect, going to spend 3 years in prison.
The judge explains that Farmer's sentences will all be served at one time and not consecutively. Farmer spent 3 years in an Ohio State prison. After his release, he briefly played professionally overseas before entering the 2017 NBA draft. He was not selected. In 2020, a warrant for his arrest was issued in Louisiana for felony domestic abuse after a complaint was filed by his ex-girlfriend. That's all for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching. Hi everyone, I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Cam.
I hope you die in prison as well.
We start things off in Racine, Wisconsin. Convicted felon Sean Reicher's in court for a pre-sentencing hearing.
You're gonna sentence me to life? Don't give a
Reicher was recently found guilty of 16 crimes against his family, including sexual assault and physical abuse of a child, as well as reckless endangerment. He's already served 12 years in a federal prison for detonating several pipe bombs in Utah. After his release, he moved his family to Wisconsin, where his abusive behavior included strangulation, beatings, and pointing a shotgun at his wife and children. It was his wife who eventually reported him to police. Today he's in court to waive his constitutional right to appear at his sentencing. And he's got company, a heavily armed security team. He's in shackles and a spit mask because he's already escaped once from a Wisconsin jail and has not been cooperative with court security. Once inside, the spit mask may be on, but gloves are off as Riker wastes no time going right after Judge Wayne Merrick.
Is this your idea, Merrick? Huh? You got me look like a clown? Stupid Palmer. Merrick. You! There we go!
When verbal abuse doesn't get a rise out of the judge, Riker ups the ante with full-blown threats.
I'm killing all you Wayne. I got your address, Wayne Merrick. I got your home address. I got address. I got address. And I'm having you all killed.
The people he's referring to are members of the prosecution team.
There ain't nothing you're gonna do about it either. You know why? Because this is a state that doesn't have the death penalty. You're gonna sentence me to life? Don't give a Don't give a I'm getting mine.
Not satisfied berating the judge, Riker sends his wrath in the direction of the prosecutor.
Leave this up.
As per his request, Riker didn't appear at his own sentencing, which would have really given him something to scream about. He was sentenced to 200 years in a state prison. Riker appealed the sentence, but it was denied. Next, we head back to the archives, to Jacksonville, Florida. It's 1997, and the defendant is Jason Psycho Stevens. And yes, his nickname is Psycho. He's been charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. Just over a month earlier, Stevens and at least 3 accomplices allegedly entered the home of Robert Sparrow and took cash and marijuana from the family. Stevens also took Sparrow's 3-year-old son, Robert. Later that afternoon, he allegedly ditched the car, leaving little Robert locked inside during an 80-degree day. Robert was found dead later that night. Police captured Stevens. He was charged with first-degree murder and a number of other crimes. The prosecution argued that Stevens strangled the child before fleeing, while the defendant claimed he left the boy in the car alive. He pled not guilty to the murder charge. Today, Stevens is making his first court appearance before a gallery packed with devastated family members of the victim. As Stevens signs some paperwork, one man sees an opportunity. That's Robert Sparrow, the victim's father. Apparently, Sparrow had become enraged by Stevens' casual demeanor since his arrest. Joining Sparrow in the attack is the victim's godfather, Lorenzo Houston. Bailiffs charge in and quickly remove both men from the scene. Meanwhile, tempers continue to flare between Stevens and family members of the victim. For their surprise attack on Stevens, both Sparrow and Houston are arrested and charged with battery. Sparrow was released on his own recognizance and apologized to the court. Charges against Houston were also dropped. As for Stevens, his case goes to trial, and after hearing the evidence, the jury returns with a verdict.
Find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
He was also found guilty of burglary and kidnapping and sentenced to death by the electric chair. Stevens would later appeal the ruling, but it was denied. He currently sits on Florida's death row. Next, we head to Clark County, Washington for a bond hearing. The defendant is Christopher Aleo. He's charged with second-degree child abuse and fourth-degree domestic violence. The defendant allegedly grabbed his 12-year-old son by the neck until he couldn't breathe and repeatedly hit him with a closed fist. The boy's grandmother witnessed the incident. When she tried to intervene, Aleo allegedly threw a playpen, hitting her in the face. Aleo's no stranger to the courtroom or prison, having recently served a 5-year term for vehicular homicide. In that case, an intoxicated Aleo crashed his car into a light pole, killing his friend Veronica Martin. Now back in court, Aleo stands before Judge John Fairgrave. When the judge announces bail of $50,000, Aleo's hit with the reality he's going back to jail.
Getting back in the system. I said, 10 months, man. 10 freaking months, man. I'm doing good. Hey, I got me right back in the system.
Sensing Aleo's increasing rage, a deputy steps in. It takes 2 officers to restrain Aleo, who receives some advice from a female friend.
No, people. These people, man. You gotta get those people over there. They're on drugs and shit. That kid needs help, man. No, man.
Once in custody, officers take no chances, shackling Aleo in a wheelchair as they bring him to jail. On his way out, he has a few words for the cameras.
Making a mockery of the church in that prison. Assault of a child. That's rape.
Aleo eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 months in a state prison.
All right, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Next, we go to Tampa, Florida, for the case against Luis Angel Lopez. He was charged with burglary and grand theft after allegedly breaking into a home to steal a TV. The case was originally headed for trial, but Lopez agreed to accept a plea deal. Instead of a possible prison term of 15 to 20 years, he's agreed to a maximum sentence of 5 years plus probation. The presiding judge is Michael Williams.
Mr. Lopez, how we doing?
I'm doing good, sir.
You ready to take your plea?
Yes, sir, I am ready to take it. I don't want to make this any worse. I'm ready to get it over with and come out and start a new life. Yeah, I got people that love me, so.
As part of your plea, if you don't turn yourself in by 5 p.m., your guilty plea is going to stand, but not the plea agreement. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Things seem to be moving smoothly as the judge goes over a few questions.
Did anybody threaten or coerce you to enter this plea or promise you anything other than what's contained in the plea agreement?
No.
Are you under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or medication that would prevent you from understanding today's proceedings?
I mean, I smoke a little marijuana, but I understand the proceedings.
Not exactly what a judge wants to hear from a defendant.
When's the last time you smoked?
Maybe like 30 minutes ago. But I mean, I can take the plea. I'm in the right state of mind to take
I'll
the
be
plea.
dead before I take your plea.
Though frustrated, Judge Williams remains calm and poses another question.
Is it possible for you not to smoke 30 minutes before you take a plea?
No, I was just nervous that I'm going in, so I was just, smoking.
The defendant may be feeling mellow, but the judge is anything but.
I'm about ready to reject your plea and go to trial, just so you know. You can roll the dice with the jury.
Buzzkill.
How do you think it looks to an appellate court that you smoked marijuana 30 minutes before taking your plea?
Bad.
Yeah, that's the legal term.
It looks like Lopez could be losing his deal. But of all people, the prosecutor, Nathaniel Mendoza, suggests a remedy.
Your Honor, I don't know if you'd be comfortable, but I know that NHTSA states that marijuana can impair driving performance for up to 3 hours. I don't know if that would mean that he'd be okay by this afternoon. If his head would be clear. All I got for you.
You may be right, Mr. Mendoza. All right.
Instead, Lopez catches a break when the judge allows him a second hearing. but with one minor stipulation.
All right, I need you to show up for court and not smoke marijuana right before you get on Zoom. You understand?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Lopez eventually appeared sober and accepted the plea deal he was offered. 5 years in prison plus 3 years probation. He was also required to pay a restitution fee of $300.
It's not good for your lungs.
Sure.
This isn't about being very skinny. This is about being dead.
Next, we head to Kent County, Michigan, where the defendants are Seth Welch and his wife, Tatiana Fusari. The couple are charged with the murder of their 10-month-old baby. The parents found Mary in her crib at 10 a.m., unresponsive and not breathing. She'd been out for 19 hours before they decided to check on her. Tatiana attempted CPR, but it was no use. Instead of calling paramedics, Seth called his attorney. He also went online to try selling a goat. It was 90 minutes later when he finally called 911. An autopsy revealed that Mary died from dehydration and malnourishment, and at the time of her death, the 10-month-old weighed just 8 pounds. The infant was underweight for some time, but the couple refused to take Mary to a pediatrician because they didn't trust the medical profession, and it went against their religious beliefs. Here's one of the many videos Welch posted on the internet sharing his beliefs and theories.
I'm not opposed to medicine or doctors. I'm opposed to bad medicine and doctors that are just, well, that aren't really doctors. They're priests of the medical cult. You know, they have a certificate from some training camp somewhere that says, you know, they got this test score, but that doesn't mean that they know, like, about the human body and stuff like that.
The couple were both charged in Mary's death, and at this preliminary hearing, they learned the potential consequences of their actions.
Charged with what they call felony murder while in the perpetration or attempted perpetration of child abuse in the first degree. They're alleging that you murdered one Mary Welch. That is a charge called homicide felony murder. It is life without parole. The second offense that you're both charged with is called child abuse in the first degree. It is life without parole.
Both defendants appear stunned by the severe potential penalties they could face. Later at their probable cause hearing, Seth's cold and callous 911 call was played for Judge Sarah Smolensky.
Do you believe she was beyond help already? Oh, yeah, it was bad as a doormat. How are you involved enough? You know, it's another day, right? Now, it is what it is.
Welch's attorney argued that while her clients may be responsible for Mary's death, it was not intentional.
The child was skinny, but not sickly. They were breastfeeding the child. These two young people are not nutritionists. They're not dietitians.
But the judge ruled there was enough evidence to send the case to trial.
This baby did not die because of one this meal. This is weeks and weeks. This isn't about being very skinny. This is about being dead.
Welch pursued an insanity defense, but it took the jury only 1 hour to reach a verdict.
On the count of felony murder, count 1, guilty of felony murder as charged. On count 2, guilty of first-degree child abuse as charged. Was this and is this your verdict?
Yes.
Seth Welch was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. As for Tatiana Fusari, she initially pleaded no contest, but then withdrew the plea. She's sitting in jail awaiting trial, but if found guilty, she could also receive life in prison with no chance of parole.
I would ask the court to give me enough time to finish my argument.
not to cut me off.
That's former Brigham Young University professor Tom Lowry in a district courtroom in Salt Lake City, Utah. He's representing himself today in a suit against his former employer, BYU, claiming that the university wrongfully terminated him and slandered him, causing his stress-induced mental illness. The university claims Lowry was let go when a part-time vocational program he was leading failed. BYU countered with a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, but Lowry won't be ignored.
Each of these factors renders this case closely analogous to the complaint in Hansen, which is...
All right.
I'm almost finished, and please don't interrupt me.
I'm going to take this man into custody and cool him off.
I'm cooled off. I deserve to be heard. I deserve to be heard, Your Honor, and you are violating my access to due process at this very moment, and this better be on the record.
It's on.
I am not violent. This, and boy,
we're going to take you into the... Take this man into custody and cool him off.
I'm cooled off.
Lowry's behavior, however, suggests he's anything but cooled off, and Judge Anthony Quinn sends in the deputies.
And this better be on the record.
It's on.
I am not violent. This, and boy...
Before he can finish his sentence, a deputy with a handheld taser shots him in the back.
We're going to take you into the...
Put your hands behind you. Here's the story, buddy. You're out of here. You resist again, you're going to get more. You understand me?
Lowry's eventually helped on the floor and dragged out of the courtroom.
We'll be in recess.
Lowry's lawsuit against Brigham Young University was later dismissed. He would later go on to file a federal lawsuit against Judge Quinn, the Utah 3rd District Court, and the state of Utah for what he claimed were discriminatory proceedings under the Americans with Disabilities Act. That suit was also dismissed. That's it for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.